Okay, what's up, guys? Welcome back. And this week we just really wanted to ground our podcast and show a little bit. That's why I brought actually the first person who may have put me on TV. Do you remember when we did that pilot? Yes, we did a pilot. I think you ended up presenting the show even.
No. I don't know what happened to that thing. I don't think it actually ever went anywhere.
All I know is that I got a live day spot voucher and that was amazing. But yeah.
it was because you insisted on coming to see me, and I had other things that I had to do.
No.
And so
you
I
double
said,
booked.
And so I said, you know, actually this will be good for you. Come, let's go.
You double booked me, but we'll go with it. But yeah, anyways, I'd like to invite my what are you? Should I call you a friend or like just Kojo? One of the few people who don't take me seriously, to my detriment sometimes. But yeah, I mean today, part of this podcast, what we're trying to do is experience topics around belonging and finding yourself in the world, in your own otherness, or whatever your interpretation of the otherness is. We did some work with Kojo, I think, was it last year or 2 years ago? And you had to do a talk, and part of the talk you were just kind of describing where you come from, and kind of like that story. So just maybe to give us context of really like who you are, where you come from, and maybe a bit just kind of like having had an experience with otherness.
Well, so this idea of others is an interesting one, particularly in this time, right? Because when you bring in LGBTIQ rights and where the world is, it's become a big conversation, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for me, to a certain extent, I feel like I get it, but not quite, because currently it seems it's very charged and there's a lot of emotion around it.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I've always been other, like if that makes sense. So I come from, I guess the easiest way to describe it, I used to do a talk on race and identity. And I used to say, I'm half German, half Ghanaian from Lesotho. I come from a family of 5 kids from 3 different mothers of 3 different nationalities, all brought up by my father. So I'm the white sheep of the family. Mm-hmm. So I'm the only biracial one in my family. Everybody else is dumb.
Yeah.
So my whole life, growing up in a place like Maseru was easy because it's not like South Africa. I wasn't a complexion, I wasn't a skin color, I wasn't a race group, I wasn't Kojo Baffoe, and Kweku's older brother. So I had context and I had a space and I had a role within the society I was part of.
Okay.
But at the same time, I've had to explain. I've had people tell me my brother couldn't be my brother because we're of different complexion.
Mm-hmm.
I've had instances, particularly when you started coming to South Africa a lot more, where I could walk with you and my father, and in this country nobody will ever think, okay, that's possibly his father.
Yeah.
Because the idea of a black man married to a white woman is still to this day unusual.
Yeah.
Right? So with that, and I struggled with it growing up. Like I struggled with the fact that I was fortunate enough to travel a lot as a child, to go visit relatives in Germany. I was fortunate enough to go to a school with 50 different nationalities, where you're interacting with people from all over the world. I was fortunate enough to be able to access like hip hop before it was even called hip hop. Like in the early 80s, but didn't have a name. Like the early 80s was just, it was this new thing that, and we'd have friends sending tapes over. In those days we had cassettes and we had videotapes. So I grew up in Lesotho, in a small country, but I was exposed to the broader world. And so because of that, I did struggle with kind of placing myself in terms of my identity. And all of us go through this kind of journey. So as a teenager, like in my 18, 19 years old, and spending time in South Africa for the first time at university in Durban, where all of a sudden, like I discovered there was something called colored at 19 years old. Right?
Oh yeah, 19?
Yeah. I get to varsity and guys are like, oh no, so you're colored. And I'm like, okay, first of all, what is that?
Yeah.
Second of all, I couldn't possibly be it. I mean, I don't know what it is.
Uh-huh.
And I'd spent a year in Europe, and in Europe, nobody ever confuses me for anything other than what I am. Because
which
is biracial, mixed race, whatever you want to call it,
Okay.
if you want to use a racial definition.
Mhm.
But like, you know, West Africans, for example, have been traveling the world and finding white partners for decades. It's only South Africa, because South Africa was so inward looking, where it's absolutely unusual.
Okay.
But go to Europe and it's not, I mean, go to the UK.
So would you say that then maybe in your experience, especially in your formative years, because of the societies and the way that you grew up in, that sense of otherness or whatever was never really a thing in this, but then how did it affect then how you related to the rest of your family? Because I would assume your siblings are, let's, for a loose term,
My siblings are black. And I mean like West African,
yes.
so West African black, so not just black, but
not
like,
just not us.
you like, you know, it's like I'd have instances where somebody goes, yeah, I'm dark, and I'll look at them and I go, you're not dark, dude. And then they look at me and I forget, right? Because I forget, because my reference point is very different from, you know, my, let's call it my skin tone. But so the otherness was never an external thing, right? So it was never you know, my younger brothers and sisters call me Abuti. And my father raised us where, you know, he raised us as a family. So my younger brothers and sisters are not, and my older sister, they're not my stepbrothers or stepsisters. They're my brothers and sisters. Like that's how we were raised.
Also, I guess the whole notion of stepbrother, stepsister. What's a stepbrother, stepsister?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
but so in terms of feeling of other, and I started to learn how to articulate it for myself.
Okay.
Much later, right? And it is something that I carry proudly.
Okay.
And I was going to use the word wear, and I don't wear it proudly because it's not something that's out there for other people. It's not about how people perceive me. It's about how I see myself and how I feel about myself.
Granted, but so where do you get to that spot, right? So I'm thinking with a lot of, especially, we were chatting earlier on around our generations, and you know me, I've been 40 different personalities, 40 different, you know, and I think I am still, which is part of why I'm doing this podcast, is still trying to understand my otherness, but also not making my otherness a condition that, like you said, that is outside of me. There's certainly, I think, a journey that you walked through, or maybe pivotal points that got you to understand that, or unless you're saying you inherently knew from day one that your otherness is within you.
Do you know what? And I think this just came to my mind as you're talking about it. It's never been about figuring out my otherness. It's about figuring out myself as a human being and going through that journey. The otherness is not a thing that's separate from me. Right? It's me as a human being living life, trying to be the best me that I can be, and going through that journey of figuring out what that means for me. Right? It means figuring out how I can be a better father, a better husband, a better friend, right? A better uncle, a better human being. And that's what I spend my time doing. Like I spend a lot of time, like now I spend a lot of time trying to be a lot more efficient in terms of how I work. Because my work is very fluid. And, you know, part of the reason why my work is very fluid is because it was important for me to be present for my children, right? So the journey in trying to figure out myself, and that's why I say that kind of otherness for me is, I take pride in it because I've reached the point where I realize that it's those things, it's the differences in me that have made me the person that I am today. It's not the thing, right? It's just like I can be very conservative, right? Whereas when and you know my wife, like her work and my work, and I remember we once interviewed and it was unlikely couples because I was the tattooed poet with afros and earring,
Yeah.
and she was working at a business school. And when they interviewed us,
you become that because she's
the,
quite
when,
out
yeah,
there.
But when
Yeah.
they interviewed us, they were like, "No, hold up, wait a minute," like because they were looking at appearance and the idea that they had of me, and I am the more not rational in the negative sense, but I think in lines, right, and I plan, and I am the stricter one to a certain extent to my kids, right, whereas they were looking at her and going, no, she works at a business school and she's a program director and she was working with some high-powered people, and it's like, oh, she must be the right, and so the thing is, for me, the journey has been about figuring out myself, and as a teenager in my 20s, figuring out my identity, and that identity, it was only when I came to South Africa that identity then had race thrown into it, right? That identity was about, as a human being, like, who am I? Not what color am I, or no, who am I? Like, what kind of human being am I? And so making sense of, I mean, I was actually starting to do some writing about, I was calling it On the Edge, about being different. Like, I mean, that's why I love Pharrell's I Am Other. Because it's like, yeah, no, we are different, and by virtue of my upbringing and the fact that how I grew up and where I live, and because there's a difference and there's a contrast of experiences within the space that I live in, there's a uniqueness or there's an otherness to me, right? But that's not not being a South African is greater, like has a greater impact on me living in this country and being from another African country than the fact that I like Marilyn Manson, right? So it's, and somebody else may look at that. I mean, I had a friend of mine, she's Serbian, and she came to my house the one day and I was listening to Rage Against the Machine, and she went, dude, I'm white and even I don't listen to them, right? And I'm like, well, I'm representing all sides of me, sometimes I must represent my mother's side, and sometimes I must represent my father's side. So when you were saying it, the interesting thing for me is I guess how we see that otherness. And when that otherness is something that's separate, when it's something that you go, because maybe it's been beaten down so much, you reach the point where you're like, here's my otherness, right? It can make it complicated. I fortunately have never had to deal with it at that level.
Because I mean, it's interesting you say that. I was thinking about myself, and I did this little intro to this podcast and saying I never had the language of otherness, and maybe I'm just too excited about this new word, because I was always, it's almost sometimes, especially when you come from a small town that I come from, Sasolburg, I was always just like, not necessarily that why is no one like me, but I always felt very different. And I couldn't, there were times where I was just like, I feel like I'm watching someone else's life, play out here. And then obviously, with the Googles and the readings, then you just discover this whole thing that says otherness. Because also sometimes labels give you a sense of safety about something. I'm like, I can identify with something. But what's interesting about what you're saying is that fine, it's an otherness, but it's so much part of you. And I think for me, it's also a function of, the people who also brought me up, right? You write a lot about fatherhood. I mean, I personally never met anyone who loves their children, who likes to talk about their children like you. You probably started...
Sometimes how I get paid.
But I mean, it's a good way to get paid. And also you're very unconventional in the sense that, even in your household, you're quite clear in public about the fact that your priority is your children first. I mean, Kojo will cancel on you because he's picking up Breaker from swimming or whatever. But where does that sense of responsibility to maybe not just say your kids, because you strike me, and we've had this conversation, that it was very deliberate for you in a sense, to be a father.
Sure.
Like you choose your children every day, essentially. But then also you've allowed them to be their own individuals.
They would disagree with you on that.
Oh!
Just because, I mean, so I want to take a step back and make a comment on something. So it's like you're talking about, you're trying to figure out growing up in Sasabek, etc. So I've watched you, I've probably known you for a good, 15, 16 years now.
Yeah.
Right? And I've watched you go through a journey. And so for me, that journey has been you finding yourself. Sounds very airy-fairy, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're finding yourself. And for me, you've just been Andrew. So the Andrew that you present to me, I know the core of you as a human being.
Right.
So when we first met was at a poetry session.
Yeah.
Then I'm bumping into you at a social gathering with loud music and alcohol. The person that talked to me at the poetry session is not necessarily a different person. The stuff around it may have changed, but the person is still the same person. So I engage with you because I know that person, that's the person that made sense to me. And we all evolve, right? We all evolve down our own paths. And as long as it's not destructive, it's kind of like, today you're dealing with otherness. 10 years ago, we weren't having these kind of conversations, right?
I just needed a job.
Right? And we're having those conversations. And now if you reach this point and we're having this conversation, it's like that's part of your journey. And 10 years from now, we may be having a different conversation. Right? So I think it's finding that, and it's taken me a long time. I turned 47 this year, so I have the advantage of many years of mistakes, right? And I continue to make them. But what I try to do is be very deliberate about it. So I think a lot about these things, right? In relation even to myself. So now tying to, in terms of my children, the main influence was my father. My father was my only parent from when I was 1 year old, because my mother passed away when I was 1. And my father's children have always been important to me. And I watched him, and I lived with my father, and I worked with my father for years. And I watched him make decisions on the basis of his children, sometimes to the detriment of his own happiness and his own peace of mind. So because of that, for a while, the idea of having children was easier than the idea of having somebody to make the children with, right? So for that reason, I think that had an impact on my view of what it means to be a father. I also did not grow up in this country. Because I've been asked when people say, so what advice would you give to men in this country? And I'm like, I won't lie, I don't get it. Absent fathers, somebody deciding that I'm not going to look after my children, it doesn't compute for me.
Do you think it's a function of, because we see it a lot. We have full-on TV shows about all of that stuff. Is it the society that we live in? Because, for example, you from Lesotho, not that it's not happening there in Lesotho, is it maybe perhaps unique to maybe your father because of just the person that he was, and it created a ripple effect? Because there's a lot of it happening now. And
look, I grew up where my friends' fathers were around, right? So it wasn't, once you got out of the city, I grew up also kind of upper middle class, right? But once you got out of the cities, obviously a lot of, in the villages, it was mainly women-led households because all the men were migrant laborers in South Africa, right? And the reason why the country is where it is today, I believe, is a number of reasons, and the reasons are tied to history. The reasons are tied to apartheid. The reasons are, there's a lot in there, right? it doesn't make an excuse for it, but that's the reality. But in terms of, for me personally, being able to like sit down with somebody who can't be bothered about his children, I don't know what I'm going to say to him because I don't get it. Right?
And do you think, so I was actually thinking about it today, if South Africa, if this country was a human body, how healthy do you think we would be? And where would we start healing first?
That's a hard one because if you look at the attention every day, so I believe that we manifest our thought. It's one of my inherent beliefs. I also believe that if you look at let's call it media across the board, there's so much negativity. How can we not? There are moments when everything feels so heavy because you've got this collective negativity just being pushed out into the world. In terms of if it was a human body, I don't think it'd be healthy.
Dialysis. That's what I'm afraid to say.
I don't think it'd be healthy. I don't think it'd be like on the deathbed as well. I mean, I think that's kind of pushing it a great deal. But I think the problem is at the core where our focus is. So I like to repeat. This is a guy called Clem Sumter. I can't remember what he bills himself as, but he talked about this idea of pockets of excellence. And when I first heard it, when I first read it, it resonated with me. And I think the example he was giving was, so for example, teachers. Right? So teachers in public schools, and we all know the stories of, teachers impregnating young girls, being violent. I mean, just the other day I was watching a video of a male teacher like lining up the students and just slapping them, right? So we know those stories. But there's also positive teachers. There's also teachers that are out there that are doing good things. We can't, if 99% of all the teachers were bad, this country would be burning. Like, if we're going to be honest, we wouldn't be sitting here, everything nice, I
mean, true, but I think I believe, and maybe I'm just a little bit anxious that we're on the brink of destruction to a certain extent. And I personally don't think destruction is bad. I think sometimes we need to destroy in order for us.
So the pockets of excellence is put attention where excellence is, and support that, and let that build out, as opposed to constantly focusing on where the negativity is, and it becomes it's a self-fulfilling cycle, right? Because imagine if you're a teacher and you're a great teacher, and your kids love you, but all day, every day, all you hear is how bad teachers are, to the point where you're even ashamed to say I'm a teacher. At some stage you're gonna go, like, why must I be like this when I get painted with the same brush all the time? Right?
And so how do you maintain then, I guess, that optimism or that drive? And for example, I'm going to segue a bit, I work in the non-profit sector, and especially the youth unemployment. And the other day I was at a restaurant, and there was this long queue. There's probably like 100 people. They were queuing, so I asked us, what's happening? And they said, no, we're interviewing for waiters. I'm like, how many waiters do you need? There were like 6 waiters. And fine, I'm like, okay, so then there's essentially 94 people who are going to be sent back home. And I see this every day, and I try to remove myself from it, but this is my reality. This is the vocation that I've chosen. But it looks so dire, and I'm struggling to find mechanisms to keep motivated and positive. And so now in a situation like yours, that we are, I'm quite interested in how, because you very much, I don't think you're ever deterred by kind of like the narrative that's happening around a lot of men and all of that in this country, because you just keep being a good dad. Like, how do you maintain that?
Well, it's about figuring out things are tough, right? That's acknowledged. Like, I personally have been going through a very tough patch, like 3-4 years financially. Like, to the point where, like, if people knew, it'd be like, yo. I mean, and I've had friends go, but how do you wake up every day? And I'm like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like, you get up and you keep it moving. Like, that's the one thing I've learned, and I learned that from my father, and I've learned that from life, is that at the end of the day, if you don't keep it moving, then, like, you can't lie down and just die. Like, you can't lie down on the floor here and go, I'm gonna hold my breath until I die. Like, even suicide is an act. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So everything is an act. Everything is a decision. Everything is a choice. Right? But my whole thing also is that we spend so much time talking about what the problems are. That's where literally all our energy. So if you look at, and I mean, I'm a social media person by and large, but if you look at social media, and if you look at the amount of energy that's expended on just talking and complaining and pointing and blaming and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And if we took 20%, imagine if we took 20% of that energy and put it into trying to actually do things.
Yeah.
Right? That will get us somewhere. No, it won't necessarily get us exactly where we want to be.
Yeah.
But at least it's a step in the right direction. So my thing is, I'm responsible for myself. I'm responsible for my family because I chose to have that family. But I also always say, when my son was born, I understood what legacy meant. Before that, like, it was always, I want to live a life of I want to leave a legacy.
What does that mean for you, actually?
So before that, was like, I want to leave a legacy. And then I had a son. And this was before my daughter, but when I had a son, it's like, legacy is the world that I'm going to leave for him and his generation. That's what legacy is.
Yeah.
So, my little cheesy line is, if I leave my little patch of this earth better for my having been in it, I'll have lived a successful life. And it doesn't matter how big or small that patch is.
Yeah.
Like, we all have different patch sizes, if you want to call it. But if when I leave, people that I've come into contact with, that space is better for my having been in it, then that for me is legacy. So with my children, if they have the opportunities, and not just them, it's them and their generation, because they're living within a particular context.
Yeah.
So if they're living in a mansion and it's a shack next door, that's not constructive because the inequalities in this country is what's creating so many problems, and just the extent of the inequality. Like, there's inequality everywhere.
Yeah.
But the extent of the inequalities is where the problems lie. So it's not just my son and my daughter, but it's their generation. To give them, for them to have opportunity to be able to make decisions on their lives. Because I really believe that most people, all they want is opportunity.
Yeah.
They want a chance to be able to do something meaningful.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what's sweeping the street, but a lot of people are unemployed, and you see it every day. They just want to be able to do something because they want to do something with their time as human beings.
It speaks to making people feel valued and heard and seen. And maybe even just on that, what about your parenting style do you think what is it that you didn't take from, I guess, how your father brought you up that
I don't know, because I'm still trying to figure out. So I mean, so my parenting style is similar to my father's, in that I have the same values that my father has, and it's important that my children learn the same values. My father, before he passed away, used to tell me I'm too strict on my son, and there have been moments where I've had to sit back and reflect on it and go, okay, in that particular instance, you were actually the problem, not him.
Yeah.
But it's an everyday thing. Right? It's an everyday. I may have figured out last week, and then 2 days later, like my son wasn't talking to me, hasn't been talking to me for the last 2 days, and then today we're cool.
Yeah.
Right. And even that, like, because particularly like amongst friends, right?
Yeah.
So somebody does something and then you're angry with them.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden tomorrow they come and they're like, hey man, it's like, but let's address this thing first.
Yeah.
And now it's your child and it's like, yeah, okay, for them that's in the past.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, so my son's turning 12 and my son is me. And the fights that he's having with me are the fights I had with my father.
Okay.
So I get him and I
Yeah.
get it. But at the same time, I will be strict on certain things because I'm like, because I know what that feels like. I also know if I indulge that,
Yeah.
where it can possibly end up. So let me nip it in the bud now. Right?
Yeah.
But it's all theory. Because at the end of the day, none of us know what our children are going to turn out like. Like,
Yeah.
just like our parents,
They were winning it.
Yeah.
They were.
and they never knew how you're going to end up, right?
True.
So it's a ongoing thing. But I think the one thing that I took from my father always used to say, as Baffos we have, there's very few things. It's about principles.
Yeah.
It's about certain values and certain principles, and not a lot. And as long as it's in line with those, it's cool. So with my children, in terms of what they want to do with the rest of their lives, in terms of all of that stuff, I'm neither here nor there. In fact, part of my work is to try and allow them to try different things out, right? But also then teach them the values. So like, you make a commitment to do this,
Yeah.
I'm paying for it, you're doing it for the rest of the year. You can't come and go 4 months into it, I'm tired of it. Because you must also learn that life is about but you must also learn that life is about those things. It's consistency. And children by and large need routine. They need routine and they need boundaries. Like, the worst thing you can do for a child, I personally believe, is to not have some type of routine and boundaries. So I mean, when I say boundaries, it's about kind of, it's behavior and it's crossing the line. It's the things that, things that are allowed and things that you can and things that you can't do. That's what I mean by boundaries. So, you're not just gonna walk into the room and talk back to somebody.
Yeah.
Or act a particular way. And because when children have that, then it gives them a framework within which, because they're dealing with, everything is new, right?
Yeah.
So you're dealing with a new world.
And they're gonna operate.
And
I guess.
everything is coming at you. And if there's no routine or boundary,
and they become those people also out in society.
and they haven't necessarily got all the tools. I mean, as adults, we don't have the emotional tools for most things, as it is. But it's even worse. It's even worse for them in terms of having the tools to be able to navigate and make sense of certain things.
And I just want to, I think we're running a little bit out of time, but just in closing and on tools, one of the themes around this podcast is, how do we create a society that operates from a place of worthiness and belonging and feeling valued. Maybe just in closing, could you just give us what would be some of the key ingredients that, and I'm not saying you know it all, so just draw, let's wing it. Let's wing it, and maybe just in closing give us a sense of how do we cultivate a society, and especially with our children, those who are here and those who are yet to come, how do we cultivate a society where they operate from a place of worthiness, belonging, of value? Because I think based on the discussion, we've seen that those create models of society.
So I'll answer it in an indirect way. So I won't give you specific tools. So there's two things. So one of the things that I learned is, so children don't listen to you. Children watch you. Right? So you can talk till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
But they watch you. So one of the things that I've learned with my children, so in my house we say please and thank you. does not hurt to be polite. But for me to teach them that, for me to teach them manners, if you want to call it, right, I need to also mirror it.
Yeah.
So even when they're in trouble, it's, can you please not do that? Right?
But I was like, first I get to remind.
So one of the things I learned is that as a parent, I'm constantly having to work on myself and I have to figure myself.
Sure.
And so particularly over the last couple of years, I don't know whether it's because I'm getting closer to 50 and I'm starting to feel like, okay, half my life is gone. But I've been doing a lot of work on myself. And it's an ongoing journey. And it's through my readings and it's through, the practices and things that I'm exposing myself to and the understanding of stuff, right? And as I do the work on myself, and I start to become, call it a better version of myself, I hope that then my children also seeing that, in terms of how you live your life and how you interact with other human beings, they will start to take that on. I mean, one of our greatest moments of pride is our children visiting somebody else, and when they come back and they go, your children are so unbelievable. And this is like with family. So it's like, it's family, it's not somebody new or anything. It's like family, and they're like, they're just so well mannered. Right? And then you go, okay, well, it does feel like we're doing something right. And so I think the responsibility is on each one of us to go, how can I be better? Because the next generations, and we're not going to fix these, sadly, there's no magic wand to fix any of these things. Right? And the reason why they continue to happen is because every generation, it's like racist children. And you go, they weren't born racist. They were taught. And so now they were taught that. So now we have another generation. Then it's like, okay, hopefully the next generation, some parents are going to put in that work. Because it's about putting in the work. And as a closing point, I mean, something that a friend of mine said to me when Estelle was pregnant with my son. He said the best advice he had been given about being a father is living your life to the fullest. Because it was like, children want to see their parents living life to the fullest. Because when your parent says to you, you can be anything you want to be, but they are not being everything they want to be. That's what the child takes in. That's what the child takes in. Right? And so with us, I mean, like, my children understand work very differently from other people because we both work from home. But then, like, their mother this year has been traveling immensely, and I'm the one that's home and I have to do the pickups, etc., etc. And I mean, this afternoon, my daughter was like, how was school? It's like, fine. So how was work? And I'm like, no, work was good. And she was like, okay, so what did you do today? And my son's like, meetings. But sometimes they come home and I'm coming out of the shower at 12. Because I take them to school, I come, I sit at my desk and whatever I need to do. And then other times in the afternoon, I'm chilling, I'm reading. Because work for me is very different from waking up, going to a place, right? And that's also for them to understand that, sometimes they'll see their mother tired, traveling, flying in and out. They'll miss her, but they also see her going out and doing stuff. And not just down the road, but across the continent. And in the same way that when she's back, and then so they understand work, but both my son and my daughter, but especially for my daughter, when she thinks about, okay, now I'm going to go work. I mean, hope of any father. I mean, guys talk about, I'm not going to have my daughter marry this kind of guy. I'm like, look, my job is to give my daughter the tools to be able to build the life that she wants. Right? And that's all I hope for. Right? And the same thing for my son. I'm trying to build the same thing for both. Like, I'm trying to give them the same platform from which to work. It does help that, particularly because of the society we're in, that with my daughter, the mother is a professional in her own right, and she works and she goes out and she's out in the world, and people have said to me, so you cool. I'm like, yo man, the money always comes to the same place.
Exactly.
That's always been my philosophy. The money's coming into the same place.
So she must go.
Whether my wife works,
yeah.
it's like, so sometimes I make decisions where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take that meeting.
Yeah.
Because I know that she's traveling. I also try not to travel when she's traveling, so that at least one of us is here.
Yeah.
But so back to the tools. The tools is and I go back to also pockets of excellence. Is if more and more of us start to come together, for example, in conversation like this, and start to live what we talk.
Yeah.
Gradually, you start to build it out further, because that's the only way we're going to fix it.
Absolutely.
Right? We can't go, hey guys, here's the tool.
Yeah.
We can't go. You can't go to fathers and say, yo man, why aren't you looking after your children?
Show them what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my last point. So I once interviewed Eric Benet, the singer, telephonically years ago, like 10 years ago. And he was separating with Halle Berry, and so all the guys were like, how can he mess that up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I'd always followed his music, and I'd followed his career and his story. And the thing that was interesting for me was that he came from a musical family, was part of a band with, I think, his siblings. And his fiancée or girlfriend fell pregnant. Okay. And she passed away, I think, 6 months after his daughter was born. And he even went and worked for like UPS, one of the delivery services. Right? He left music for a while and went to work. And so through this whole Halle Berry conversation, and they were talking about Halle Berry adopting his daughter. For me, the thing that was most interesting was because this man had raised his daughter from when she was 6 months. And he had raised his daughter. So even if Halle Berry was going to adopt this child, it wasn't going to, like, it needed his permission. It's not a...
It's not rescuing a child, essentially. Right? Yeah.
And she was a teenager by then. But I asked him. So when I interviewed him, it was telephonic. So I asked him. So I said to him, look, in South Africa, in the US as well, particularly amongst, Black America, etc. In South Africa, we also have a challenge of absent fathers. Like many are not taking responsibility for their kids. And he said to me, when his girlfriend fell pregnant, he thought, that's my music career over. Like, he went into that mode.
Yeah.
Like, this is like an inconvenience, right?
Yeah.
The music is going, etc. And then he made the decision to participate. It was just like participate. So he said to me, and my son was maybe 6 months old then? Not more than a year. And he said to me, I always encourage every man to go into the delivery room. And because it was so fresh for me, it made perfect sense. Because I think one of the challenges we have, because men are not in the delivery room. I mean, like, I even have friends, in inverted commas, like people that were friends and we've drifted apart, but who were in the delivery room and they're still not there for their kids. So it's not a guarantee. But he said to me, I encourage them to be in that room because there's something about being in that room. Because as a man, particularly your first child, a woman is going through changes, physical changes. They're with this baby from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
So they get that there's a baby coming. As a man, you understand it in theory. You're like, like, the stomach is growing bigger.
Yeah.
And,
it's not that real yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So you understand in theory. Then the baby comes out. You're like, oh my God, okay, this thing. And that always, I talked about other stuff. That's the only thing that ever stuck with me. Because I believe that at least some men, not all, but at least some men, to be part of that experience. I nearly passed out. Twice.
Yeah.
Right? And the second time I was like, I got this. Emmett was the same guy. Like the entire team was the same hospital, same space.
Yeah.
And then my daughter's born. I walk around. I pick her up. All I knew is this time I was like, because the first time I was like, is it getting hot in here? And like, baby sat me on the floor.
Yeah.
Water. Second time around, I was like, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I held my daughter, and this year I went, sorry, do you mind holding her?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I went and I sat down on the corner.
Like
on the floor.
pass out.
I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Even though I've been through the experience before, it's like I was still overwhelmed. So there's something about that experience. And I think one of the challenges is that men are excluded from a lot of the processes in the lead up to a birth of a child. And I mean, also even in certain cultures, the mother and the child go to the parents' home for like 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I didn't have that, so I sit and I look at that and I go, that's the critical bonding period. You know, and that's the period when you're both trying to figure stuff out. And so what kind of, and you have fathers and you have great fathers who've been through that process. Yeah. It's not an indictment of the process, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of going, maybe we need to think about some of these things because the way it's been working is not working. And when it's not working, you just try stuff. It's like, let's just try it.
And that goes to what you're saying around how we wing it. But I mean, I think for me, out of this conversation, I know we're a little bit ahead of a time. I came into this conversation to kind of say, okay, cool, what can fathers do to be, I guess, better fathers and heal? But I think, and also for me as a spiritual person, I think there's an energy exchange that you speak about when, like you're saying, being in that delivery room, but also at those first kind of critical months and critical moments of a child is that you create a bond. And also another thing that you said which reminded me, I went to go consult with Nokuli Ndoksagoma.
Okay.
And I was waiting for such an amazing answer, like, what do I need to do to be a better person? And she was just like, focus on yourself. Like, if everyone in this world was like, do you.
Yeah.
Do you, take out that energy. But I really think you're definitely onto something around men need to be included, need to include themselves in those spaces where they can really create a bond. Because once you attach and love to something, it's very difficult for you to neglect and let it go.
And I mean, like, and for me, children are such an amazing. I call it the greatest blessing, right? And I'm not a religious person. I never have been, right? And I always tell people, I mean, so I was with 3 friends, one single, no kids, and the 2 of us with kids, and we were talking, like we're sitting there talking, school fees and this, and kids are expensive, and extramurals, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually the guy's like, no, I'm not having kids, guys. Both of them, what the hell do you mean? Like, it's the most amazing thing.
After complaining.
Right? It's the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, but I've just heard you guys complain. And I go, yeah, exactly. Like, it's that amazing. It's like, it's that amazing that you'll sit and you'll think, I need to pay school fees, and I need to do this, and I could be traveling, and none of that crosses your mind. With all the stuff, none of that crosses your mind. I mean, like I joke with, we tried for 5 years to have a child. And we went through all the medical processes, which is not fun.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, the one day we were talking, friends, like a couple, and they were just like, somewhere in the world, and they've got this, and they have paintings on their walls, and all of this stuff, and it's like, yo, man, I got a school fees to pay every single month. And like my son is turning 12, and he's getting a drum kit for his birthday.
It's not on my knee. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because he's been doing drumming, and he said, listen, if you show commitment to it, and you do it for longer than a year, like my commitment is then I'm gonna get you a drum kit. So now it's like, drum kits are not cheap, right? Even secondhand, I've discovered.
Oh,
right?
goodness. So now I'm not having kids,
but despite all of that, I mean, It's like I've watched my children become friends.
Yeah.
And it's the most amazing thing to watch. Right? When they fought because they're 4 years apart.
Yeah.
Then one day you look at them and they're having a full-on conversation. You're like, they're not just brother and sister. They're actually friends. And it's like, yeah, in spite of us, like all our awards and all our things, and you sit and you look at these two human beings having like a full-on conversation, and are friends and are hanging out, and you go, yeah, man, like that's such an amazing experience. So, I mean, I guess what fatherhood, as a closing, what fatherhood should teach, or parenting in general should teach all of us, is to be able to look at ourselves. And I think the problem, going back to kind of where we started, this idea of otherness, etc., is that it often feels like we're constantly looking at stuff from the outside in. And we're trying to make sense of things in relation to how everybody else is trying to make sense of things and how they see us within that context.
Yeah.
When all we actually need to do is focus on ourselves, like you said. Because you do the work on yourself, that then it spins out into
energy,
into those close to you, and it goes further and further.
Okay, Kojo, thank you so much. This was, I mean, it went. Yeah, I had my own agenda, but I think that's the great thing about having these conversations. Thank you so much, guys, also for tuning in. This was Kojo. Please follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube. Don't follow Kojo, he's got enough followers. And yeah, thank you.